Hi, I'm Malika Bilal. Today, Muslim intellectual Tariq Ramadan joins the stream.
The prominent scholar shares his views on Islam's place in the world and what he calls the silent revolution. I'm Dan Ming. Swiss academic, philosopher, and author Tariq Ramadan has had his share of controversy. His supporters say he has been working for decades to bridge the gap between European Muslims and secular society.
His critics accuse him of holding misogynistic views and having a hidden agenda to Islamicize Europe, which he denies. He joins us now from New York, Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at the University of Oxford. Professor Tariq Ramadan, welcome back to the stream. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I'll start this part of the conversation with your latest book, Introduction to Islam. I'm holding it here. And in it, you write in the very first sentence, hardly a day goes by without some mention of Islam. And yet many people, if pressed, will admit that they know very little about the religion of 1/4 of the human race. Why was it so necessary, do you think, for this book to come out now?
In fact, my publisher called me and saying we were looking for an introduction to Islam and they didn't find something which is suitable for our time. So they asked me to write something, and it took me 30 years just to go to this and to try to say something about Islam, which is once again not responding to the criticism or the controversies, because 99% of the time when we come on media is to say what Islam is not. It's not violence, it's not discrimination, but to come with a simple introduction, simple without being simplistic, about Islam, and trying to understand the terminology, understand the concepts, understanding the worldview that Muslims have, understanding the principles, the history, and also the diversity within. This is essential. And I am trying in this book to deal with all the controversial issues, but not in the way the media are covering them by asking the first questions, but within this introduction by saying, okay, this is the worldview, and we have to deal with some of the challenges in Muslim majority countries as well as in the West, for example.
So 30 years, though, of scholarship and research, how do you then condense that into this book? What did you leave out, and what did you think was most important to be in here?
I think what was really important is just to get a sense that when you deal with a universe of reference, when you deal with Islam, you have to understand the spirituality, you have to understand the philosophy, and you have to understand the principles and the history. But you also have, as Muslims today, to deal with the challenges of our time and to address some of the issues our fellow citizens in the West, but not only in the West, by the way, in Muslim majority countries it's exactly the same, that we need to tackle some issues. And for example, when it comes to violence, to say where are the limits of the accepted diversity within Islam, and people who are killing innocent people are in fact behaving against the Islamic principles. So I think that I'm trying to tackle this, as well as some social issues when it comes, for example, in the way we have to deal with equality between gender and women within the society. I'm just trying to be honest with the challenges that we are facing, and also this book is for two audiences. I'm talking to Muslims by telling them, look, you have to know your history and your tradition, and you have to deal with some of the controversial issues. But I'm also talking to people of other faiths, atheists, agnostics, Jews, Christians, people who have nothing to do with Islam, but they are living with Muslims. They should also get a sense of what Islam is and what the Muslims stand for.
So talking about how you also write to non-Muslims, I want you to take a look at this tweet we got from Anthony in New Zealand. We asked people how they learned about Islam if they're not Muslim, and he says he learned about Islam from BBC documentaries, Wikipedia, and from the news for over a decade. And he also mentions the movie The Message, which is from the 1970s. What do you hope someone like Anthony in New Zealand gets from this book? What is the overall effect that you're hoping for?
That's exactly the point. You are making the point. We can't now deal with pluralistic society or live within pluralistic society having very superficial knowledge. So what we have as a responsibility, what responsibility I have as a Muslim scholar, is also to provide a better understanding by talking to my fellow citizens the language they can understand. So translating concepts and notions from Arabic to English, trying to get a sense of what are the common values that we have and the differences that we may face in our daily life, but also to get a sense of Islam is not an alien religion. Islam is a Western religion, and you have to get it. You are going to deal with your fellow citizens, and in fact, we have to build the future together. So it's not only to get a sense of who are the Muslims, but also what are we going to build together? What are our common responsibilities when it comes to the future? And this is critical, and I think that it's a call for more knowledge, more commitment to some of the principles, and something which should be stop with the victim mentality. All of us, we have to stop with the victim mentality and to come and say, what are our responsibilities today to make this world better, to change the world for the better?
So I want to just bring it to current events now, talk about things that are in the news, and we'll start with the travel ban, the newest travel ban from the US. Take a look at this tweet from Noreen Shah. She's with Amnesty International. She says, turning the Muslim ban into a travel ban won't fool us. This ban will still cause thousands of people to live and travel in fear. So I wanted to ask you this because you were personally denied visas to the United States between 2004 and 2010. Can you talk about what effect this new policy, putting a sign up that's effectively saying to people from these countries, we don't want you here in the US right now, what effect does that exclusion have?
Yes, and just let me say something about what is happening today in Las Vegas and to express our condolences to the family of the victims and Puerto Rico. And you know, I think that this is also a sense of belonging to our societies to express condolences and to the families and the victims. That's something which is important, knowing also that sometimes, and this is the starting point of our discussion, we should not confuse between the government and our fellow citizens. So the government, and it happened, you know, under the Patriot Act. It happened to me for 6 years with no reason except that I had political positions being very critical towards the American government, and we had now Trump and his administration expressing something which is clear. It is a Muslim ban. It's targeting some of the countries, so we may add, you know, Venezuela and others just to make it not something which is targeting the Muslims. We all know that it's targeting the Muslims, and some Muslims only. We are not going to have any ban from the Gulf states because this is where the money is coming. This is where we are selling our weapons. So that's the point. The point is, who are you banning and why are you doing this? Expressing a sense that Islam is alien to the religion, that anyone who is coming from Muslim majority countries is suspicious. And it happened to me to the point that at the end, it's the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton who said publicly, there is nothing preventing Tariq Ramadan from coming. So it's just, you know, spreading fear and nurturing this fear. And the future of our country, if we go that way, is going to be very, very dangerous, because these people and the Trump's populism, in fact, is based in spreading fear and saying, I'm going to protect the country from these Muslims that are, in fact, a threat to our future. No, the threat to our future is people like him and people on within the political spectrum who are nurturing fear, nurturing mistrust among the citizens, and not helping us to get this peace, which is so important for us today, between black and white people, between the rich and the poor, and understanding that the future of our country cannot be by banning people and telling the people you have to show us that you are true citizens to the country by not speaking out, by being silent. That's not the future. If I am an American citizen, if I'm a European citizen, I should be critically loyal to my country. And what does it mean? If my government is right, I'm going to support. But when my government is wrong, I'm going to be critical. Muslims are not. That's not the point. The point of citizenship is not your religion. The point of citizenship is an ethics of citizenship based on principles. So I think that what is coming now with these policies that are banning the people, right, and targeting the Muslims are very dangerous.
Yeah, Professor Ramadan, you mentioned leaders who attempt to show that Islam is alien in their lands. I want to show a little clip of a leader who some say tried to do the opposite of that. This is French President Emmanuel Macron in August. This was his first major foreign policy speech, and this is what he said.
Assurer la sécurité de nos concitoyens fait de la lutte contre le terrorisme islamiste la première priorité de notre politique étrangère. Oui, je parle bien d'un terrorisme islamiste et j'assume parfaitement l'emploi de cet adjectif. Car rien ne serait plus absurde que de nier le lien entre les actes terroristes que nous vivons et une lecture à la fois fondamentaliste et politique d'un certain islam.
Macron goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing here, we mustn't be naive and we mustn't be over afraid of Islam. We mustn't confuse Islamist and Islamic. We mustn't look at the millions of Muslims that live in Europe with suspicion. So some would say there's a bit of a conflicting message there, and others would say he's trying to parse apart semantics. What's your take on it, and do you believe him?
Yeah, I think you are summarizing the point. It's exactly this. It's conflicting messages that he's sending. He's right on one thing, that the Muslims cannot keep on saying it has nothing to do with Islam, and these people who are killing Daesh and Boko Haram, for example, have nothing to do with Islam. We can't say this. These are Muslims, and I'm not going to put them outside Islam. The takfiri position by putting people outside Islam is wrong, and saying that, yes, they rely on verses of the Quran, but it's a distorted understanding, it's a wrong understanding, it's outside the accepted diversity of Muslims. And this is what I'm explaining in the book. We have to be very clear by taking clear stance, and this is what I have been doing for 30 years, much before even 2001 with what was happening in Muslim majority countries. We have to do the job. Now, what he is saying is in fact his policy in France and his policy abroad is not helping this message to be clear, because he wants us to understand we have to condemn violent extremism. But what about the French policy going to bombard the people, the civilians in Syria or in Iraq or in Libya, and telling us this has nothing to do with what they are doing to us in France, while the people are saying you kill us there, we're going to kill you in France. Of course we have to condemn violence, but we also have to condemn the French policy and the French politics supporting dictatorships outside, supporting some of, previously they were supporting Ben Ali in Tunisia, they were supporting Gaddafi, they welcomed Gaddafi in Paris, and all of a sudden he's a terrorist, he is the bad guy, and France is playing has the right role in the whole thing. That's completely wrong. And plus, what is now the discourse about Islam in France is making the French Muslims second-class citizens by the way they are suspected. The state of emergency is targeting Muslims in a way, in an unprecedented way. And I think that this is why we have to say, you are right by telling us we have to be clear on violent extremism. What about your foreign policy? What about your domestic policy?
So on that question of domestic policy, towards Muslims in Western countries, we have this tweet here from Nestle Han. Listen to it. She says, Western Muslims aren't part of mainstream society, and she says, because my daughter suffered harassment in Australian schools for being the only Muslim student. To bring it to Europe, I want you to take a listen to this video comment we got from Reem Sarah. She's a PhD researcher in France.
A recent survey conducted by the Vienna-based Agency for Fundamental Rights found that a large majority of European Muslims feel deeply connected to the countries they live in and trust public institutions in spite of widespread discriminations. For example, with respect to France, it was shown that Muslims born and raised there feel a deep connection to their country. Given that, what would it take for European Muslims to one day be fully accepted as faithful citizens by their fellow men and women? Or will it never be enough, despite how hard they try to assimilate and prove their allegiance?
So Professor Ramadan, she says, would it ever be enough? Why do you think that there's this disconnect between how European Muslims often feel in their countries as citizens, and the way their fellow citizens see them?
That's the point, and I think that what you just showed is a critical message. We need to be quite clear on this. What is said by the politicians and the media coverage of the Muslims or the European Muslims, and by the way, exactly the same as the American Muslim, because what we have been experiencing in Europe, it's coming now to the United States of America and even to Canada. And we have to be clear here that this narrative that, integration is failing, the Muslims don't feel that they are part of the society, they are alien to the society, this is simply not right. This is not the experience of Western Muslims in Northern African countries as well as in European countries. That's not the truth. They belong to the society and they are more and more visible. So there is a disconnect, yes, between what is happening at the grassroots level, at the local level, within the society, and the narrative saying and suspecting the Muslim, because we need to get it right. This policy and this narrative coming from politicians is just shifting the political discussion, because they are not able to deal with unemployment. They are not able to deal with discrimination and stigmatization. They don't know how to deal with the social problems, so they are ethnicizing them. They are Islamizing them. They are saying it's you because you are Muslims. And in fact, the Muslims and the Western Muslims and the European Muslims are now having this feeling that they belong to the country. So we are in a post-integration phase where now the most important thing is for the Muslims not to be on the defensive, to be assertive, and not to speak about integration, to speak about their contribution, the added value that they have within the society. And this is what facts and figures are showing. It's far from the narrative coming from the politicians and the media. And we need to understand it will take time, but we are going to succeed on this. I'm very optimistic about this. It's going to work.
So
and it's working
I
already.
I don't want to dim your optimism, but I do want to bring up 2 points here and get your thoughts on them. So this is from the UN Human Rights. This is via Twitter. France, draft counterterrorism law may have discriminatory repercussions, especially for Muslims. And they go on in a statement, this is dated September 27th, to talk about that draft law that really the emergency powers that you mentioned a little bit earlier that might impinge on the rights of people in the country, and particularly Muslims. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, you have this headline, just recently came out, this is via The Atlantic. What went wrong with France's de-radicalization program? Now, we've heard of these quote-unquote de-radicalization programs in other countries, not just France. The UK has one as well. What do you make of programs like this that are, the purported aim is to make sure that young Muslims do not join groups like ISIL? What do you make of their success rates?
Yes, look, this is something which is very important, and we have to talk about the security policies, the state of emergency. By the way, we are talking about France, but as you said, it's exactly the same with Prevent in the UK. It's the same with the Patriot Act. And what we have, for example, in France now, it's exactly what we had before in the States, which is we go from the state of emergency to, or Patriot Act, to normalizing within the legal framework laws and ways of dealing with security and monitoring the people, which is normalizing a state where we are losing our freedom. So this is exactly what is happening in France. Now they are saying, oh, we are going to stop the state of emergency. But if you look at their policy, they are normalizing through the legal system things that are now you can monitor, you can spy, and you are even asking Muslims to do the job for the state within the community. And Prevent is exactly the same. And what is happening in the States is exactly the same. So in this, the name of this war on terror, or this way of dealing with radicalization, we are losing our freedom. And what I'm saying to my fellow citizens in the States as well as in Europe, be careful, because you might think that it's only targeting the Muslims, but at the end it's all of us. We are all, as citizens, losing our rights and our dignity in the way we are monitored by the state, spreading fear and telling us, you know what, you are scared, we are going to protect you from being threatened by monitoring you. And this is not only about Islam. This is one. The second, which is also something which is very important, is all this business about de-radicalization. And I was involved with the British government by saying something. Let us talk about radicalization. What do you mean by radicalization? That they were first believers and practicing Muslims, and then they step by step they became radicalized? That's not the truth. Facts and figures are showing that the great majority of the people who went to this are going to a very quick shift, to the point that in Nice, for example, they were saying, oh, it was an overnight radicalization, very quick. What's that? What are we talking about? Let us be serious about the fact that many of these people have nothing to do with religion. They are not practicing Muslims, and they are dealing with something which is different. Frustration, a sense of alienation, and also sometimes instrumentalization and brainwash on internet. Let us be serious about this, and it's not going to work like this. And I would add one point which is essential. to all the governments, to the US government as well as all the European governments. They should understand that the Muslim citizens are part of the solution. They are not the problem. If we suspect and we spread around that all the Muslim citizens are suspected citizens, it's not going to work. We need to get it right. We are all against violent extremists, but let us be part of the solution and not being perceived as alien to the society, source and only source of the problem. And then we also have to connect this to the foreign policies, because it's not going to work. We are not isolated, and we are not in isolated countries.
So Professor Ramadan, we have a lot of ground to cover, and we're heading towards the end of the program. I want to make sure our community's questions get answered. So to change to the topic of religious doctrine, take a listen to this question we got from Nicole. She's a religious educator in the United States.
Sometimes it seems that the fear of assimilation has impeded Islamic scholars from developing their ethical thinking and advancing issues specifically with respect to slavery in the past and now contemporarily gender issues. So scholars have often thought about keeping tradition as the sole way to kind of maintain the purity of the religion and, in a sense, protect it from innovations, themes that are repeated a lot in Islamic jurisprudence and texts we read about Islam. But this brings up the myth of some pure Islam that existed in some past and that we're trying to retrieve. Is it really accurate to think of Islam as something pure and from the past? Or is Islam a dynamic, evolving, and relevant religion and faith that has meaning in any time and in any space?
So Professor Ramadan, do you see Islam as a dynamic religion, and if so, how?
Yes, and I think what she's saying is completely right. And I think that, yes, we have immutable principles, we have immutable rituals, we are not going to change these, we are fasting, we are praying, this is not going to change. But the way we have to deal with the surrounding culture, the way we have to deal with the new status and the new challenges means that there is no faithfulness without evolution. And I keep on repeating, Islam does not need reform, but the Muslim minds need. And she was talking about gender, she was talking about equality, and she's even, I would add to this, creativity. We need to have, arts, artistic, aesthetics, all this is so important, and we have to move on. So the scholars who think that we are going to protect by isolating and stressing only on the rules and relying on the rules, this is not going to work. The contribution is to be an intellectual, cultural, social, artistic contribution, and this is where the scholars, as well as, by the way, average Muslims, should be involved in the process.
So as part of that, I pulled up this headline here. This is an interview you gave several months ago. Tariq Ramadan, there is a silent revolution underway. What did you mean by that?
No, I think that is exactly what we are witnessing today, because, we are talking as if the Muslims are not moving. Over the last 30 years, look at the evolution of the Muslim narrative in the West, and by the way, also in Muslim majority countries. I'm just coming back from African countries. You have exactly the same. You have men and women now trying to be faithful to the religion. So I wouldn't, accept, for example, as a Muslim believer, just to make the unlawful lawful and the lawful unlawful. We have principles and we have a frame. But now what we are witnessing on the ground, look around you, look in the United States of America, the new generation of men and women, now they are speaking out. They speak the language of the country, they get the culture, and now they want to be faithful to their religion and at the same time to be fully American and fully Europeans, and it's succeeding, and it will succeed. This is the future. So I would say that this is why you might have to question my optimism. But my optimism is based on facts and figures. I have been working on the field for the last 35 years, and I can tell you what we were saying and seeing 35 years ago is not what we are seeing now. And we have now leaders and new generations of people coming, and we have to trust them, and we have to hope that with their fellow citizens, they will be able to contribute for a better future.
Well, Professor Tariq Ramadan, we're going to take that optimism with us as we end this show. That's all the time we have for right now. The book is Introduction to Islam, and I will give the last word to our community, Dan.
So our community is enthusiastic about the fact that this book exists. We got a comment from YouTube. Just a reminder, we're live on YouTube now. Such an important book to be released when there's so much confusion and lack of understanding.
Thank you to our community for joining us, and thank you to Professor Tariq Ramadan. We'll see you next time.